Badan Pengembangan Sumber Daya Manusia Provinsi DKI Jakarta memiliki UPT Pusat Pengembangan Kompetensi dan Kebijakan Publik dengan branding Jakarta Public Policy Center yang merupakan wadah pembelajaran dan kolaborasi pengembangan kompetensi, sharing knowledge, best practice, dan experience serta knowledge management kebijakan publik di pemerintah Provinsi DKI Jakarta. Jakarta Public Policy Center menerapkan pola pengelolaan keuangan Badan Layanan Umum Daerah. Berikut adalah produk dan layanan yang disediakan oleh Jakarta Public Policy Center. Public Training, memfasilitasi sharing knowledge dan best practice melalui seminar, podcast Rabu Belajar, fasilitasi penerimaan kunjungan dan studi banding, kerjasama nasional dan internasional. Tersedia juga pengembangan kompetensi bagi ASN Pemerintah Provinsi DKI Jakarta.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, ohayo gozaimasu, good morning, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Honorable Chairman Jakarta City Regional Human Resources Development Agency, Mrs. Maria Kiptia, Chairman Jakarta City Regional Development Planning Agency, Mrs. Atika Nurmania, but today represented by Chairman of Center for Research and Innovation Regional Development Planning Agency, Mr. Andika Aji. Honorable guest speaker for today, Deputy Director of Environmental Policy Divisions of Saki Town, Shizuto Takehara-san. Director of the Circularity Assessment Protocol, Circularity Informatics Labs, Ms. Tyler Madeline Meyers. Lead Cities and State Working Group, School of International Future, Mr. James Robert Balzer, and CEO After Oil, Mr. Rifo Romelio. Honorable Distinguished Official of Ministries and Institutions, Distinguished Official of Jakarta City Government, Distinguished Stakeholders of Jakarta City's Development and Planning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the participants of this webinar who have taken the time to attend this morning, without diminishing respect, I apologize for not being able to mention your name one by one. Welcome to the webinar, Building a Smart Waste Management System in Jakarta. Today's webinar provides a platform for stakeholders to share information, experiences, and potential collaborations regarding the issues of building waste management system in Jakarta. Distinguished guests, our audience, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Chairman Jakarta City Regional Human Resources Development Agency to deliver the opening remark and officially open today's webinar. Mrs. Maria Kiptia, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone, and good evening for our colleague in USA. May prosperity be upon us all. The Honorable Representative of USA Embassy, Australia Embassy, and Japan Embassy, Representative of Indonesian Central Government, Chairman of Jakarta City Regional Development Planning Agency, who is represented by Chairman of Center for Research and Innovation Regional Development Planning Agency, Mr. Andika Aji, the Honorable Speakers and Moderator, representative of official within the provincial government of Jakarta Province, representative of universities and NGO, invited participants, and everyone who attend this session. Welcome to our third Urban Talks webinar, Building a Smart Waste Management System in Jakarta, from Upstream to Downstream. This event is a collaboration between Jakarta City Regional Development Planning Agency and Jakarta City Regional Human Resource Development Agency. Dear participants, Jakarta Human Resources Development Agency have a primary purpose to provide information on what Jakarta Province has done, is doing, and plans to do. This webinar aims to facilitate knowledge sharing from experts to impart valuable insights, expertise, and experiences. This webinar can be a platform to gain a deeper understanding of the policies in place and provides an opportunity for discussion and learning from various competent speakers, particularly in the field of public policy. This, I would like to thank to the Jakarta City Regional Development Planning Agency as a collaborator which have given civil servants in Jakarta opportunity to learn together directly from the expert. And to all the speakers, Sisuto Takahara from Japan, Tyler Madeleine Myers from USA, James Robert Balser from New South Wales, Australia, and Bapak Rivo Romelio from Indonesia, as well as the moderator Bapak Ahmad Gifari from Jakarta City Regional Development Planning Agency. I would like to express my highest appreciation for coming to this event, despite your busy schedule to share knowledge and experiences. Thank you very much. And to the participants, I hope that you can have a fruitful discussion to get the optimal benefits. Once again, welcome and thank you very much for attending this event. Thank you. Arigato. Terima kasih. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mrs. Maria Kiptia, for the opening remarks. Next, we kindly invite Chairman of Center for Research and Innovation Regional Development Planning Agency, Mr. Andika Aji, to deliver the keynote remarks. Mr. Andika Aji, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us all. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, greeting of virtue. Distinguished official of ministries and institutions, distinguished official of Jakarta City Government, distinguished head of Human Resources Development Agency of Jakarta City Government, Ibu Maria Kiptia, distinguished stakeholder of Jakarta City's Development and Planning, distinguished speakers of webinar, Mr. Takehara from Japan, Ms. Myers from United States of America, Mr. James Balzer from Australia, and also Mr. Rivo Romelio from Indonesia. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the participants of this webinar. First and foremost, I would like to convey the apologies of our chairman, Ibu Atika Nurrahmania, as she could not be here today due to other assignment from acting governor. She extends her warm regards and wishes for this event today. It's a pleasure for me to join you all for the third session in our Urban Talks webinar series. On behalf of our Jakarta City Government, I warmly welcome everyone for today's discussion. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to our esteemed speaker for dedicating their time and insight to this event. My gratitude also goes well to Human Resources Development Agency for supporting us, the Center for Research and Innovation, and collaborate in making this webinar possible. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as one of the world's largest cities, Jakarta faces considerable waste management challenges, which are not only local, but resonate global as a part of our shared commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. In particular, SDGs number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and SDGs number 12, responsible consumption and production, are directly connected to Jakarta's need for an efficient and resilient waste management system. Urbanization, population growth, and economic expansion place increased demand on waste infrastructure, making it essential to prioritize sustainable practices that reduce environmental impact. Jakarta's waste issues encompass an overwhelming volume of waste generation, limited landfill capacity, inadequate waste segregation and recycling, overflow and uncollected waste, environmental pollution, and also pressing needs for heightened public awareness. These challenges underscore the need for collective action in line with the SDGs number 6, 11, 12, and 13, which focus on clean water and sanitation, sustainable urbanization, responsible consumption, and climate action, respectively. The responsibility to address management in waste challenges lies not only with government, but also with business, communities, and each individual. An effective response must go beyond improving waste collection and disposal infrastructure. It should embrace a holistic approach by focusing on reducing waste generation through educational initiative, policy enforcement, and promoting recycling and circular economy strategies. With these sustainable and innovative approaches, Jakarta has the opportunity to take proactive role in improving waste management, aligning itself with SDGs objective and setting a model for urban sustainability. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I hope that webinar such as this one continue to foster knowledge sharing and advance our long-term goals in Jakarta urban preparedness. Even by this webinar, will broaden our scope for international partnership with research and innovation organizations that can aid Jakarta in addressing sustainable development issues. Such collaboration are fundamental for achieving SDGs number 17, which promote partnership for the goals and encourage cooperation among diverse stakeholders. In this spirit, Jakarta Provincial Government, through the Regional Development Planning Agency, is committed to working with global institutions to establish a thriving research and innovation ecosystem. This will allow us to create solutions that not only address Jakarta challenges, but also align with the global mission of sustainable development. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, building a smart waste management system in Jakarta that covers all stages, from upstream to downstream, demand technological integration, policy innovation, and sustainable practices that directly support SDGs 11 and 12. As a megacity, Jakarta particularly impacted by the issue of rapid growth, high waste generation, limited landfill spaces, and environmental consequences. Developing a smart waste management is an essential step toward minimizing waste, optimizing collection and disposal processes, and promoting recycling and circularity in waste management. Achieving this mission, however, present challenges, including securing necessary funding, fostering behavioral changes in our community, integrating informal waste sector, and establishing supportive policy framework. This issue highlights the importance of SDGs number 9, which advocate for building resilient infrastructure and fostering innovation. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by the experts from Japan, the United States, and Jakarta-based, also Australia, representing the collaborative pentahelic model of governance. These speakers brings valuable perspective from their experience with smart waste management system worldwide. This webinar provides an essential platform to exchange knowledge, create networks, and synchronize effort to realize sustainable solution for Jakarta waste management, ultimately reinforcing our contribution to SDGs objective. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I hope this webinar proceeds smoothly and also serve as a foundation for continued collaboration to advance research, innovation, and sustainable urban practices in Jakarta. Together, we can work towards a greener and more sustainable Jakarta that align with our global commitment to the SDGs. Thank you very much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Mr. Andika Aji. Honorable guests, before we proceed to the presentation sessions, I kindly ask all the panelists to participate in group photo sessions, and please give your best smile, and please turn on your camera, and I will assist with countdown on 3, yeah? Okay, let me check. Okay, everyone is ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, once again. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right, thank you very much. Distinguished guests, our audience, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, this is webinar with Building Smart Waste Management System in Jakarta, and I'll hand it over to our moderator, Mr. Ahmad Ghifari, to lead this discussion sessions. Mr. Ahmad Ghifari, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rudy, for your introduction. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good everyone, because some part they are still evening. Thank you to all participants and speakers this morning. We are happy today with all great speakers who will share a great idea also. Today, we are convening the Urban Talk Series 3, centered on the theme, Building a Smart Waste Management System in Jakarta from Upstream to Downstream. My name is Ahmad Ghifari, and it's my honor to serve as a moderator for today's event, where we'll be addressing the critical issue of developing smart waste management for Jakarta. Ladies and gentlemen, we are organizing this event to foster the dialogue among all stakeholders in developing a policy framework that enhance the environment sectors, besides to explore the comprehensive approach to waste management, addressing the entire life cycle of waste handling from collection to sustainable disposal and advancing Jakarta environment resilience. As we know that Jakarta is grappling with several urban challenges, with waste management being a major concern. The city produces approximately 7.7 thousand tons of waste daily, putting immense pressure on the environment. This waste problem is a key contributor to greenhouse gas emission, or GHG, releasing around 1.5 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emission per year. So overall, GHG emission from final disposal at the Bantar Gebang integrated waste treatment site contributes the large emission Jakarta in totally 2.03 million tons carbon dioxide equivalent emission per year. Then Indonesian government has responded with the zero waste, zero emission to 2050 initiative, aiming to eliminate the waste sector's contribution to emission by 2050. However, the current state of waste management in Jakarta still relies heavily on transporting waste from household to temporary storage site and landfills, with a minimal segregation at the source and inadequate intermediate treatment facilities. Then a key challenge in Jakarta waste management system still need for improvement public participation and awareness. Households hold a pivotal role in managing waste effectively, and without their active engagement in essential practice such as waste segregation and recycling, it will be challenging for the government to achieve its waste reduction and sustainability targets. So to address the challenges, we will learn from practices implemented in other developed countries such as Japan, United States of America, Australia, and also our innovator from startup in Jakarta. Japan has created waste management system that other nations can learn from and adapt to their context. Osaki City is a small town in Kagoshima Prefecture, but the city is known as #1 waste recycling management town in Jakarta, I guess. The city showed the community-driven recycling system has set a model for effective waste reduction and sustainability. Another country that has best practice in waste management system is United States of America. Waste management in the US involves a combination of local, state and federal policies and private sector involvement, and vary significantly across region due to factors like population density, industrial activity, and environment regulation. The US waste management system is robust, but face significantly challenge related to the landfill capacity. I guess we are also the same like in Jakarta. Recycling efficiency and plastic pollution, and also the proper disposal of hazardous and electronic waste. Another country is Australia. Australia waste management system is the framework, has a framework that handles various types of waste, including solid, liquid, and electronics, hazardous, and organic waste. As a developed nation, Australia waste production is substantial, which necessitates an efficient waste management infrastructure to cope with the diverse waste streams generated by various sectors of the economy. Indonesia, especially Jakarta, has many innovations as effective strategy to solve Jakarta waste problem. One of them is from the After Oil, the startup institution offering the innovation which turning waste into biocharcoal and transforming biocharcoal into activate functionalized carbon. So implementing this process on an industrial scale in the cities like Jakarta could transform urban waste into a high-value product, potentially providing solution for both waste management and environmental protection. Therefore, this event aims to gather stakeholders, including government officials, academics, practitioners, and the private sector to provide recommendations for building smart waste management system in Jakarta. So today we are delighted to have 4 exceptional speakers with us. Then allow me to introduce each of speakers for this event one by one. Our first speaker is Mr. Shijuto Takehara, Deputy Director of Environmental Policy Division, Osaki Town, Japan. Good morning, Takehara-san. Thanks for joining this webinar. The second speaker is Mr. Taylor Madeline Mayers, Director of Circularity Assessment Protocol, the Circularity Informatics Lab. Hi, Miss Taylor. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you here. The third speaker is Ms. James Robert Balzer, lead Cities and State Working Group, School of International Futures. How are you, James?
Very, very well. How are you?
Yes, good. Thanks for joining this event.
It's all right. Selamat pagi.
Yes, and the last speaker is Mr. Rivo from After Oil Startup. Selamat pagi, Mas Rivo.
Selamat pagi, Pak Ahmad Gipari.
Thanks for joining this webinars. So let's give a round of applause for our speakers. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to outline the agenda for this morning event. During the presentation session, we will have presentation delivered by 4 speakers. And after all the speakers have finished their presentation, I will continue to the next session with the panel session. There will be 2 questions for each speaker, yes. And then followed by the question and answer session from the audience. The participant who would like to ask questions, please type them in the Q&A chat box. And don't forget to mention your name, affiliated institution, and indicating to whom the question is addressed. Okay, now coming up, we will hear presentation from each speakers. Each speakers will have 20 minutes to present their topics. Our first speaker is Mr. Shijuto Takehara. Let me introduce first. Takehara now is Deputy Director of Environmental Policy Division. He joined Osaki Town in April 1999. Osaki Town has achieved several accomplishments, including 15 times rewarded highest resources recycling rate in Japan, and winner of the 2nd Japan SDGs Award, Cabinet Secretary Prize, SDGs Future City, and city ongoing international promotion of the city system, Osaki system, a low-cost and sustainable recycling project with the participation of local communities. So without further ado, Takehara-san, please time to present.
Hi. Okay. Okay. Hi. Papa, Ibu, Selamat Horat. Ladies and gentlemen, let's regard. Okay. My name is Shizuto Takehara. Please call me Takehara. ちょっと待ってくださいね。共有、share。OK。行きました?共有。いってない?
OK、share。
はい。ただいまご紹介いただきました、日本の大崎町という町の環境政策を行っている竹原と言います。
My name is Takehara, and I'm in charge of environmental policy for the government of Osaki Town in Japan.
本日このような場に参加させていただけることは、大崎町としても非常に光栄であり、またお声をかけてくださった主催者のジャカルタ・バペタの皆様には本当に感謝申し上げます。
It is a great honor for Osaki Town to have the opportunity to participate in this event today. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the organizer, the Bapeda from Jakarta, for inviting us.
はい、今日お話をすることになったか、なぜ、お話をさせていただくことになったかと言いますと、大崎町は日本でリサイクルでナンバー1の自治体であり、2014年からインドネシアで、支援をしてきた関係でですね、本日お話をさせていただきたいと思います。
The reason why I'm speaking at this event is because Osaki Town has the highest recycling rate in Japan, and since 2014, we have been supporting the introduction of the Osaki system through JICA in Indonesia.
はい、リサイクルの街から世界の未来を作る街というタイトルで、我々がやっている取り組みを紹介させていただきたいと思います。
I would like to introduce Osaki Town's efforts under the title From Recycling Town to a Town that Creates the Future of the World.
はい、大崎町のリサイクルの始まりは、今から約25年前に遡ります。
Recycling in Osaki town began about 25 years ago.
はい、埋め立て処分するゴミが増え続けたことにより、リサイクルをすることになります。
Because the waste, the garbage on the landfills was increasing, so we have to do something.
はい、今ここに映っている画像は、1990年に利用された埋め立て処分場になりますが、分別を全くしていない状況でゴミが増え続け、この埋め立て処分場が数年しか持たないという可能性に直面しておりました。
The landfills in this image, which began operation in 1990, faced the problem that the amount of the waste continued to increase without any sorting, and that it might be closed within a few years.
当時、国もリサイクルの法律を整備していく時期でもあったので、家庭や事業所でゴミを分別、リサイクルして、この埋め立てられるゴミを減量化することで、この処分場の残余年数を伸ばすことを大崎町は選択することとなりました。
At that time, the national government was also preparing recycling laws, and Osaki Town decided to extend the remaining years of the landfills by separating and recycling waste at home and in business, and to reduce the amount of the waste sent to landfills.
はい。この仕組みを、するために、リサイクルするためのルールを作り、住民の理解を得ることが最も困難だったのですが、大崎町の取り組みの特徴の一つは、この図の通り、住民、行政、企業という3つの主体が共同、そして連携することにありました。
The most difficult part was creating rules for recycling and gaining the understanding of the resident. But one of the characteristics of Osaki Town's project is the collaboration and cooperation of the three main parties, which is residents, governments, and business, as shown in the diagrams.
はい、この3つの主体のうち、どれが欠けても今の大崎町の取り組みはありえません。
Osaki Town's systems would not be like today if any of these three parties were missing.
その中でも、想像する通りですね、一番重要な役割を担うのは住民であります。住民の皆さんが家庭で分別に協力しないと、ゴミの減量化というのは、成功できないということになります。
The most important roles, as you can imagine, is the residents. And reduction will not be successful unless the residents cooperate in separating waste at home.
じゃあ、大崎で、それぞれの主体の役割について、行ってきたことをお話ししたいと思います。
I would like to talk about the details of the roles of each party.
はい、私もそうなんですが、行政の役割になります。
This is my part, actually, the role of the government.
行政はゴミの分別の長期的な計画を策定して、資源の出荷先の確保、また、ゴミ出し日時や収集ルートなどの、分別の仕組みを整備することでございます。
The government role is to develop a long-term plan for separating waste, secure a destination for shipping resources, and establish a separation system, such as determining the date and time for garbage collection and collection routes.
はい、ここの写真にある通り、地域のリーダーに町のこの仕組み、取り組みを知ってもらうための研修会も開催します。
And just like in the photograph in the presentation files, we also implement the training for leaders in community to explain them about the separation.
大崎町が分別を開始した25年前には、約150の地域で450回の説明会を開催しました。
When the separation waste began 25 years ago, Osaki Town held a total of about 450 explanatory meetings in about 150 areas.
はい、今でも年1回は地域のリーダーに研修会を開催することにしています。
Even now, the training and explanation sessions are held once a year for about 150 local leaders.
また、教育ですね。学校へ出向いて、子どもたちへリサイクルの意義を伝える環境学習会を開催しています。
And we also visit schools to help environmental learning for education to teach children the importance of recycling.
はい。行政が仕組みを作っただけでは ここがなかなかうまくいかないです。次は住民の役割になります。
But the role of government is not enough. So we have to talk about also the role of the residents.
はい。最も重要な住民の役割として、ゴミをきれいにして分別して家庭で保管していただきます。
The most important role of the residents is to clean up their garbage, separate it, and store it at home.
大崎町では個人ごと、家庭ごとに回収は行わずに、住民のコミュニティで管理するステーションで種類ごとに資源ゴミを回収することにしています。
In Osaki, instead of collecting it individually, recycled garbage is collected by type at a station managed by the residents community.
はい。大崎町では28品目の分別がありますが、家庭では写真にある通り、6品目程度を分けていただき、住民が管理するステーションに持って行って資源として集めています。
Actually, in Osaki town, the rules is to separate the waste to 28 types. But for residents, they only have to separate it to 6 types. And they will bring it to the garbage station decided by the community.
はい。教育を受けた地域のリーダーが分別が間違っていないか確認をして、地域のみんなでゴミ出しの手伝いをすることで、分別の意識も高まって、コミュニケーションの場としてもなっています。
The trained local leaders check whether the separation is correct, and everyone in the community helps each other with putting out the garbage, which raise awareness also of separation and also serve as a place of communication between the residents.
はい。では次に、この出荷ですね。これをゴミを集める役割です。
Next is the role of the companies which is collecting the garbage.
企業ですね。大崎町では、町が企業に委託を行い、ゴミの回収と中間処理をお願いしています。
In Osaki, the town orders a company to collect the garbage and perform intermediate processing.
ジャカルタでも活躍する SRC、総リサイクルセンターが、ここの役割を担っていただいておりますが、
The So Recycle Center, the name of the company is So Recycle Center. They're also doing the project in Jakarta.
住民が分別したゴミを種類ごとに効率よく回収し、生ゴミはすべて堆肥化。で、資源ゴミは輸送コストを抑えるため、圧縮梱包され、リサイクル業者へ出荷されます。
In Osaki, this is SRC collect the separated garbage from residents efficiently, and all food waste is composted. And to reduce transportation costs, recyclable garbage is compressed and packaged before being shipped to recycling companies.
はい。家庭でチェック、ステーション、コミュニティでチェック。で、最後に、ここ、総リサイクルセンターで資源に異物が混入していないかをさらに検査をして、より品質の良い資源として出荷する役割も担っています。
To get a higher quality resource in Osaki, the first separation check is done by the residents in their home and by a leader of the community in a station, garbage station. And then the last is by companies in their plan.
はい。大崎町では、この民間企業の協力により、効率よく収集、運搬、そして中間処理ができていることになっております。
In Osaki town is able to efficiently collect, transport, and process garbage with the cooperation of these private companies.
はい。こちらのグラフですが、リサイクルはあくまでも手段であり、目的は埋め立て処分場の減量化です。
What we want to say from this graph is recycling is merely a method. The goal is to reduce the amount of garbage in landfill sites.
この縦グラフはゴミの総量なんですけど、年間4000トンのゴミが大崎町では排出されています。
This graph is show the change of the amount of garbage in Osaki. In Osaki, about 4,000 tons of garbage is generated annually.
しかし、グラフの色を注目していただければわかると思いますが、水色の部分が埋め立てられていたゴミ、緑色の部分が資源ゴミの量を表しています。
However, if you look at the colors of the graph, The light blue part represents landfill garbage, and the green part represents the amount of the recyclable garbage.
分別の取り組みをすることで、埋め立てから資源に変わっていったことがわかる。そういうようなグラフになります。
This graph shows that the separation initiative has led to a shift from landfill to recycling.
1998年から2016年の埋め立て量を比較すると、84% のゴミが削減できているということがわかります。
Comparing the amount of landfills garbage in 1998 to 2016, we can see that it has been reduced by 84%.
はい。もう一つメリットとして、コスト面のグラフになります。
Another benefit is relating the cost.
日本の平均の自治体が一番左で、平均のリサイクル率が 20%、1人当たりのゴミにかかる経費が 16,800 円です。
This table compares the national average in Osaki town with disposal cost. The national average is 20% with the cost as shown in the diagram.
大崎町では、リサイクル率 83.1%、コスト 11,500 円ってなります。
And Osaki town average cost is about 11,500 yen, and the garbage recycling is about 83%.
つまり、他の自治体に比べて、ローコスト3分の2の経費でゴミ処理ができているっていうことになります。
So we can compare to other cities that Osaki town's cost of processing the garbage is only 2/3 of other town in Japan.
はい。我々はインドネシアの抱える問題は、過去の大崎町で起こった問題と類似しています。低コスト。はい。
We thought that the problems facing Indonesia are similar to those that occurred in Osaki town in the past.
低コスト、すぐに取り組みを開始できる即効性という点で、大崎町の経験と技術が生かされれば、ゴミの減量という問題解決につながるのではと考えております。
So if we could utilize Osaki town's experience in technology, which is low cost and can be started immediately, it could lead to a solution to the problem of reducing waste.
このような取り組みで培った大崎町のノウハウを、JICA の協力をいただき、ジャカルタ、デポック、バリで減量化の支援っていうのを行ってきています。
And with the cooperation of JICA, Osaki town is supporting waste reduction already in Jakarta and Bali, and also Depok in Indonesia, using the know-how it has cultivated through such efforts.
こちらはジャカルタでの行っている事業のイメージの図になります。
This is an overview of the project that we carried out in Jakarta.
数箇所のモデル地区からゴミを回収をして、ジャカルタリサイクルセンターで、中間処理をして、再資源化の出荷という大崎町の一連の流れを実践しました。
So we implement a series of steps on some model areas in Jakarta, sorting and collection from several communities, and doing some intermediate processing and such as compression packaging at the Jakarta Recycle Center to ship the recyclable garbage to companies.
結果としては、各モデル地区では 40% 近い埋め立ての削減率を達成して、インドネシアでも有効であることが示されています。
As a result, each model community achieved a landfill waste reduction rate of nearly 40%, demonstrating that the system is also effective in Indonesia.
はい、混ぜればゴミ、分ければ資源。大崎リサイクルシステムは、住民一人一人がゴミ処理の課題を自分のことのように受け止めて、今、自然と行動に移している点にあります。
When mist is a trash and when spirited is resource, the Osaki recycling system is characterized by the fact that each resident takes on the issue of waste disposal as if it were their own problems and naturally takes action.
インドネシアでもゴミ処理の課題を行政だけの問題で済ませるのではなく、住民一人一人がゴミ処理問題に対して危機感の意識を持ち、住民の行動変容を促すことが大切だと考えます。
In Indonesia too, the issue of waste disposal cannot be left as the problem of the government alone. I believe it is important that each resident be aware of the crisis regarding the waste disposal problem and change their behavior.
大崎町もこれまで通り、ゴミの減量化、資源化の技術支援を行ったいと考えてますので、これまで以上に、行政、住民の皆さん、ルールの策定や協力が必要になってくると思います。
Osaki Town would like to continue to provide technical cooperation for waste reduction and resource recovery, but to do so, we will need more than before the cooperation of the government in Indonesia to formulate the rules and participation of the residents.
はい。ジャカルタ州、ひいては地球環境の、政策の一つになるように、私たちも全力でサポートしますので、共に頑張っていきましょう。
We will do our best to support you in contributing to Jakarta State's environmental policies, so let's work hard together.
以上で大崎町の取り組みについての発表を終わりたいと思います。
I believe this concludes my presentation of Osaki Town's project.
Terima kasih banyak. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for your presentation, Takehara-san. It sounds great insights from Jakarta government initiatives related to the waste management system. Yeah. I heard that Osaki Town has introduced an approach to smart waste management that does not rely on the incineration, is it? Yeah. So I also finding from your slide that some reduction, the cost of the waste also happen when they do it. Yeah. So the government has successfully engaged not only the community, but also private sector in tackling the city waste issues. Is it? Yeah. And then waste management education also instill as early as in the school, right? Emphasizing it's important to foster the behavioral change in community. Yeah. This is very interesting one, I guess, yeah, to our city. Yeah. This education also cultivates discipline practices of sorting waste by time, place, and day. So ultimately, this has evolved into a deeply rooted cultural norm within Osaki community. Then we give applause to Takehara-san. Good, thank you very much. Okay, to enhance our horizon related to this issue, we also want to hear from others countries' experience and learn the best practice from the United States of America for the second speaker. The second speaker is Ms. Taylor. Hi, Ms. Taylor.
Hello, good morning.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening for you. Okay, let me share her bio. Yeah, she's still in progress with her PhD in environmental engineering at the University of Georgia. She also works for Director of Circularity Assessment Protocol, CAP, and Graduate Research Assistant, University of Georgia. Council on Environmental Quality. Besides, she also works as Executive Office of the President at the White House, right? Good.
I did, yes, for a brief time earlier this year.
Okay, then we extend the floor to Ms. Taylor. Taylor, your stage, please.
Great, thank you for having me. Let me share my screen and make sure it shows up correctly. Oh, I might switch this. All right, can you see my slides all right?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everything in between. And thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to present to you all. I've been lucky to travel to Jakarta several times, and I wish that I could be there in person with you all today. So a lot of what we do at my research group is studying plastic pollution. And so I wanted to do a quick primer on why we care about plastic. It's a fairly new product that came about in the 1950s, but it kind of encouraged a throwaway living culture. If we look at production over time, it has grown exponentially since the 1950s. And the largest portion, which is in hot pink here, is single-use products. So these are things that are intended to be used just once, often for less than 10 minutes, and then discarded. So plastic has transformed things like transportation and food security and medicine, but overwhelmingly it's being made into single-use products that get discarded very quickly, and end up mostly in the environment or in landfill. So the result is that all of that complex, extremely persistent, high-value material is ending up in all of the wrong places. We know that about 80% of all plastic that's ever been made ends up either in a landfill or in the environment. And we also now know that around 11 million metric tons of plastic waste enters the ocean every year. And the majority of that comes from land-based sources. So as I said, plastic is a really useful material. It can take on lots of different characteristics from different additives, but that's also what makes it very difficult to reuse and to recycle. We now know that plastic and its associated chemicals also affect environmental and human health throughout its life cycle. Plastic particles and the chemicals associated with them have been found in the air above Mount Everest, in the deepest parts of the ocean in the Mariana Trench, and even in human blood and human tissue. Plastic pollution is also an environmental justice issue, as negative effects across the entire life cycle from production to disposal disproportionately affect marginalized and disenfranchised communities. So we know that the issue of plastic is inescapable and ubiquitous, but most importantly, we really believe that it is solvable. The first ever global plastics agreement is currently under negotiation at the United Nations. So this concept of a global plastic crisis is reaching the highest levels of governance and discussion. Circular economy is emerging as a potential approach to tackle this issue. But the question still remains, what do we actually do from a global, regional, national, and arguably most importantly, a local level to address this issue? So our research group has developed what we call the Circularity Assessment Protocol, or CAP. And it was born out of the need to understand what circular economy actually means on the ground, what it looks like at a city scale, and how we measure it. So we define circular economy as a system of circular materials management whereby the concept of waste itself is essentially obsolete, and waste production is eliminated as much as possible through systems that rethink the way that we produce and consume. So in a perfectly circular system, every output has an input back into the system in a way that is safe and sustainable. So what CAP does is it provides a snapshot of a city's circularity that can provide data for local, regional, or national decision-making to reduce the leakage of waste into the environment and increase circularity. CAP has been conducted in 56 cities in 16 different countries to date. Sadly, we have not done Indonesia, or we have not done Jakarta yet, but we have done other cities in Indonesia. We would love to collaborate in Jakarta at some point. And you can use this with any material stream. So you could look at construction and demolition, you could look at organic waste, but most commonly, the cities that we work with are concerned with single-use plastic. There are 7 spokes that combine qualitative and quantitative data collection that comprise CAP. So we look at input, which looks at what products are sold in the community and where do they originate. Community looks at the conversations that are happening and stakeholders' attitudes and perceptions. Material design looks at products, formats, and innovations that are found in the city, particularly packaging. Use looks at community trends around use and reuse of product types. Collection looks at how much waste is generated and what it comprises. End of cycle as opposed to end of life, because we like to think about waste as at the end of its life cycle, looks at what the fate of waste is once it's properly discarded and how it's treated. And finally, leakage looks at what waste ends up leaking into the environment. Why and how is it getting there? And how do we prevent it from getting there in the first place? So I'm going to talk about two applications of CAP. The first being through a case study with a project called Urban Ocean. Urban Ocean is a three-way partnership between the Resilient Cities Network, the Circulate Initiative, and Ocean Conservancy that takes cities through a process of mapping challenges, risks, vulnerabilities, and opportunities to develop an integrated approach that tackles things like solid waste management, circularity, and resilience holistically. CAP, our protocol, was selected as a data collection tool for cities to go through in the first phase of the project to identify their baseline and their opportunities. This project first started during COVID, so we were not able to travel, which actually turned out to be a great opportunity to develop a remote training program. So we trained local implementation partners in all of the cities that we've worked in for Urban Ocean. And the first cohort was with Panama City in Panama, with Pune and Chennai in India, with Kanta in Vietnam, Semarang in Indonesia, and then Malacca in Malaysia. So I won't go through all of the spokes, but we did a comparison across all of those first 6 cities. And one of the things we looked at were where convenience products were coming from. We sampled 1,300 convenience products across all 6 cities and looked at both manufacturing distances and parent company distances. What this tells us is where there might be opportunities for things like extended producer responsibility. So you can see here, for example, Semarang and Pune actually had a lot of local and regional manufacturers. And I know that Indonesia is currently working through a recently updated regulation on extended producer responsibility. So I think there are some really great opportunities for that. We also compared the material types of to-go items, almost 500 to-go products from food vendors around the city. Not surprisingly, multi-layer plastic was very common, which is often difficult to recycle and collect and has low value in the recycling sector. Interestingly, we saw a higher diversity of material types in cities that had bans in place. So that could sign a transition away from single-use plastic and to trying different materials. When we look at litter, we documented over 27,000 litter items across all of these 6 cities using a citizen science app called Debris Tracker. We see striking similarities, especially among the Southeast Asian countries, and we see a lot of the same top products. For example, cigarettes and plastic food wrappers were among the top 5 litter products in all cities. But there are also interesting unique items. For example, in cities like Pune, tobacco sachets were more common than a traditional cardboard container of cigarettes for tobacco. This tells us what the most problematic litter items are so that we can then look upstream to interventions to prevent them from getting there in the first place. In terms of waste management systems, waste and its collection look very different in different parts of the world. But universally, what goes into the system must match the capability and capacity to manage that material. If not, the material is likely to end up as litter. We saw a lot of different types of solid waste management, but unanimously there was a need to divert away from landfill, increase recycling, increase composting, and build critical infrastructure for things like collection, cleaning, sorting, and transport. Importantly, the informal waste sector was also critical in all of the cities that we worked in, especially in terms of increasing collection and reducing leakage or litter. So importantly, what we can do with all of this data is conduct an analysis to see which types of interventions might have the biggest impact on circularity in a city. So for example, you can see that things that look farther upstream, so extended producer responsibility or product bans, are going to have a higher impact on circularity than simply just eliminating a single type of litter. So we're able to quantitatively and visually demonstrate the benefits of upstream interventions to optimize circularity. You'll notice that extended producer responsibility is on here often. And this is something that also showed a lot of promise in Semarang, and I think will also be really impactful for Jakarta. With the recent updates to the original roadmap that included extended producer responsibility, this really opens the door for things like take-back schemes, plastic credits, and similar systems that add value to plastic in a system and prevent it from entering the waste stream in the first place. Urban ocean is a really unique process in that our findings and opportunities that are identified through that CAP are turned into opportunity assessments by the cities, whereby they develop a proposal which can then be pitched to funders and supported through Urban Ocean and its partners. And this year we had the first Urban Ocean Summit with all cities that have participated. And we're actually wrapping up our third cohort of cities now, and we're looking to complete our fourth cohort next year. We did publish a paper on this comparison, if it's of interest to you all. It can be found here, and I'm happy to share that afterwards. So last, I'm going to bring you back to the United States, to my own backyard, and go through a case study of what we found in Athens, Georgia. So in 2022, we conducted a CAP right here in Athens in our own backyard. And we were able to identify problematic items for consumers, for the waste management system, for litter, as well as their sources and opportunities to stop them upstream. This is the citizen science app that I mentioned. This is a free open source app that we use for our data collection in CAP, but can be used anywhere in the world. We've documented over 8 million litter items on every continent to date. And the data that comes out looks like this. So one of the benefits of Athens is that our chapter of Keep America Beautiful also uses this app for all of its cleanups and its annual inventory. So we have a really robust record of litter data in Athens. And that will tell us not only how much is there, but what material types, and importantly, what items specifically. So we see a lot of foam fragments, we see a lot of beverage bottles, and we see food wrappers, cigarettes, and other things. We've also set up a litter trap. So Athens has a lot of river systems running through it, so we know the hydrology is important. And so we've set up a mechanism whereby we can track the litter that is being collected in our waterways, particularly after heavy rains. And similarly, we see a lot of foam fragments and a lot of plastic bottles. We can also look at our storm drains. So our storm drains are regularly checked to see what is ending up trapped there that may be blocking the system. We see a lot of takeout containers. We see a lot of to-go food materials, lots of bags, bottles, and styrofoam. So these are all things that we can tie to the restaurant and store surveys that we do in the CAP and understand why they're ending up there in the first place. So one of the key findings from our CAP was that there was a high quantity of food waste in the waste stream and also an increasing amount of compostable plastic. But there was a lack of collection system for those materials. Earlier this year, we piloted a curbside compost collection system in Athens that serviced about 400 households. And it ended up being very successful. And we had really great feedback from the participants, the haulers, as well as the managers of the landfill, which also fall under our county jurisdiction. I'm also a member of our Solid Waste Advisory Commission in Athens, which comprises of city officials, local businesses, and residents. And we're in the process of using that CAP data and that litter data from the app, from the storm drains, from the litter trap, to inform local policies. So for example, we're trying to propose ordinances that will limit the use of problematic items like single-use plastic bags or expanded polystyrene containers, which we know are leaking out of our waste system and ending up in the environment. And it's a great platform to get the community involved in solid waste management decisions and policies at the local level. Finally, Athens has some fantastic resources for residents and local businesses to really easily recycle difficult materials through our charm. We're able to engage in reuse and repair through our teacher reuse store. We can get involved in cleanups through local nonprofits, and our county hosts annual events like our Vulture Festival at the landfill, which gets community members involved in knowing where their waste goes and helps them to be better stewards of it upstream. So with that, I am happy to answer some questions at the end of this presentation, and I will pass it back to Ahmad and our moderators. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Taylor. Such a great insight following the lesson learned coming from the United States of America. I guess you start with the alarming the global plastic crisis, yeah, and an issue that compels our attention due to its fast scale and impact. The unchecked production of plastic, I guess, if not managed, present a severe threat. Yeah. So to address this, strategic intervention framework has been developed to mitigate future plastic pollution. Start with reducing plastic production and targeting a zero input concentration goal. And then we find some interesting with the CAP models, like Circularity Assessment Protocol. Maybe Jakarta could be one of the pilot, maybe not only Semarang, yeah. Probably, Taylor.
That would be fantastic. We would love that.
Yeah, sure. Well, we're coming to that. Yeah. So as a result, you're also showing the application that we can collect comprehensive data on the global distribution of plastic waste and monitoring its progression over the time. So applause to Taylor. Ms. Taylor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, then next, we also listen from another best practice from Australia. The third speaker. The third speaker is Mr. James. Are you there, Mr. James?
Yes, I'm here.
Yep. Let me give your background, please. He's compiled the study of Master of Public Policy at Australian National University and Master of Sustainable Development at Macquarie University. He also works as the Director Future 100 Fellowship at World Economic Forum, lead Cities and State Working Group, Pledge Network at School of International Future, and also works as a Senior Project Officer at New South Wales Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. James also doing a workshop with a government organization about the management of Sustainable Development Challenge. These are workshop government organization with charges especially. So anyone or organization might be interested in the further information, maybe after that we can discussing with James. Yeah. Then we extend the floor to Ms. James, who will now take the stage to present.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Ahmad, and thank you to my previous speakers. It's been fantastic to hear from best practice in Japan and United States. And now I have the honor of being here as per the invitation from Gemma to talk about what's happening in Australia for the circular economy, and in particular, what that could mean for Jakarta and perhaps other jurisdictions around the world. What I'm going to be focusing on specifically is the CSIRO Circular Economy Roadmap, which is sort of the Bible of circular economy strategy in Australia. Now, the CSIRO, as you can read on the slide here, is Australia's national science agency. So it's the chief science sort of, I guess, aggregator, or the chief scientific research body of Australia that informs government policy to do all things to do with science, technology, engineering, and maths, or STEM for those who know the acronym. And they put out this paper, which is the roadmap for plastics, glass, paper, and tires. And using this roadmap, they've identified 5 key industries that are most critical to the Australian economy in developing a circular economy: mining, construction, manufacturing, agriculture, and resource recovery. Now, this is not going to just be about those products, but it does speak to the fact that a circular economy looks different in different contexts. Every country, every jurisdiction has different priorities and different resources they can and should manage in a circular fashion. To go back to the Australian context for a moment, we know that Australia, being a developed country, does produce and consume a lot more than developing countries, meaning that we are, on a per capita basis, a very high generator of waste and emissions, like the United States, and perhaps to a lesser extent, like Japan. We have quite a low circularity rate right now, being at 4%. So there's a lot of room for growth. And developing a circular economy can actually foster new industries and technologies. So it's not just an environmental imperative, but there is an economic imperative as well, for economic value add and economic diversification, and leveraging our traditional strengths in agriculture and mining, for example. So the CSIRO thinks that we can potentially have pathways to target a 10% per capita reduction in waste by 2030, and possibly by 2030 have an 80% average resource recovery rate from all waste streams, which is also indicated in the National Waste Policy Action Plan. Circular economy, for those who aren't familiar, is different from recycling. Circular economy, as my previous speakers have covered, is about how can you consistently reuse and recover and repurpose products in near perpetuity. Not complete perpetuity, because products do wear away over time, but in as long as a lifespan as possible. And extending the product life cycle is really key to circular economy, and one of the things that differentiates it from recycling, because recycling is a better upgrade from the linear economy, that's for sure, but it focuses more on the down cycle elements of waste management. So more on the parts that are closer to the use and waste component of the waste management process. And a circular economy, by contrast, looks at a more holistic upstream and downstream, or what we will call upcycling and downcycling vision of waste management for the long term. And so we actually, in a circular economy, look at how we can repair, reuse, return, recycle, repurpose waste for the long term and expand the lifespan of it. And therefore seeing waste as a value-added product in an economy. I heard someone say that waste is just material without an identity, which is an interesting way of thinking about it. So we typically talk about the 10 R's of circular economy. And at the very top, we have refuse, which is how can we just not use material in the first place? How can we reduce it, possibly redesign it, maybe reuse it as a second-hand product? And if not that, repair it or refurbish it. And as we get closer to the down cycle stages, we start looking at remanufacturing, repurposing, and then after all that is being considered, then we consider recycling. And then potentially at the end, if there's no more capacity to recycle a product and expand its lifespan any further, we can recover it through incineration. But the idea is we want to extend lifespan of products for a long time. There is obviously a waste management and a pollution reduction need for this, but there's also very high scope 3 emissions in waste production and transport. And so the longer we can expand the lifespan of products and materials, the more scope 3 emissions we can mitigate. A lot of what we think about in circular economy is the technical element. So looking at materials, looking at processes, factories, those kinds of things. But we also need to think about the broader picture, the sort of distal or the more ultimate factors that can enable or disable an effective circular economy. And that includes having proper markets, so proper supply and demand of circular products, proper processes to actually enable those products to be embedded with circularity. Hang on. Oh, good. The fire alarm just was about to go off, but luckily it didn't. The governance of waste over the long term. And overall, just thinking about the broader public, not-for-profit and market actors involved in a circular economy. So accounting for all that I've just said about circular economy and the circular economy roadmap, two things that the CSIRO circular economy roadmap identify as barriers relate to what I've talked about, meaning that there is, one, a lack of clear technical infrastructure to actually enable the circular economy, which prevents the uptake of circular economy markets, given we don't actually have the resources to create circular products for the long term, but also a lack of reliable data and standards. So we don't necessarily have clear-cut definitions and verification mechanisms about the circularity of products. And so if we were to engage in a circular economy market with buyers and suppliers, with government procurement and corporate procurement and so forth, it's very easy to accuse organizations of greenwashing. And that's something that's been a big hindrance on circular economy in Australia and across the world to date. So number one is a lack of recycling infrastructure. Now, I use recycling loosely. When I say recycling, it really just means facilities that can facilitate circular economy. So obviously, as per the 10 R's, recycling is one of the second bottom step in the 10 R's. But we also, when we talk about recycling infrastructure, when I mean it in a loose term, in this context, we need facilities that can help repurpose, remanufacture, and repair and redesign products as well. So we need to build new infrastructure, but also upgrade existing recycling and waste management infrastructure in order to enable the upcycle components of the 10 R's to actually take place. In Australia, we have this thing called the Recycling Modernisation Fund, which is one way we're trying to overcome this issue. So the RMF is $250 million to expand and upgrade existing recycling infrastructure in Australia, which can hopefully stimulate $1 billion of investment in collaboration with state governments and industry. So as I said before, we have to make sure circular economy is not just seen as a waste management issue, but is actually seen as an economic issue as well, but also an economic opportunity. And the idea about the RMF is that hopefully it will increase Australia's annual processing capacity by over 1 million tonnes. And that's really important if we want to increase our circularity rate from 4% into something that is a lot more sizable, as per the objectives I mentioned earlier. The thing we have to think about, and one of the big challenges we have in Australia, but also a lot of countries have this challenge, is we don't really have very good soft plastics recycling or soft plastics management systems. So we have a lot of recycling and circular economy around hard plastics, and we have more of an idea about what that's going to look like. We don't really necessarily know is how do we actually support soft plastics from beginning to end. And so we need to promote collaboration among supply chains, not just from people who produce the plastic, but also those that buy the plastic and then perhaps on-sell it onto consumers. But we also need to, as mentioned here on the fourth dot point, build confidence in the ability to invest in recycling infrastructure in Australia. And that confidence, in part, comes from a clear definition and verification methodology of circular materials to make sure that those who invest in these products are not accused of greenwashing. And that ultimately means that we have, if we can actually achieve that, we can support long-term jobs and a more highly skilled workforce in the recycling and circular economy industry in Australia. So we have up to $60 million of the RMF committed to the plastic technology stream, and some state governments are also co-financing these as well. This is a grants program for now, although I wouldn't be surprised if they move into a debt or equity funded model in the future. And partner organizations, usually from the private sector, have to contribute 50% of the financial costs to total projects that are proposed under the grant scheme. So once again, getting that industry buy-in and making sure we're partnering with industry. And this grant program, by definition, bakes that in and allows for that. So the other thing we have to think about as well is in Sydney, for example, we're running out of landfill space. So by 2030 in Sydney, we won't have any more landfill. And that's a really big problem. And we then also need to think about, well, do we want to help regional areas bear the load of waste management and circular economy? Because it looks like they'll have to. Now, what does that mean for jobs in the regions and in rural areas? That's a really important question. And so given the need, like the push factor to actually go and promote circular economy and waste processing in country Australia, but also the ability, or rather the pull factor, to promote good jobs and economic growth in regional Australia, we need to promote better regional circular economy infrastructure. And Australian state and territory governments have provided between $10,000 and $1 million per project through 2 RMF regional and remote stream funding rounds. So once again, that's the other big challenge Australia is facing, which other countries, including Indonesia and Jakarta, might want to focus on. And luckily, different states in Australia, like the Western Australia government, have actually really been able to jump onto that and collaborate with the federal government to develop 9 new recycling plants to improve the capability, and will receive $44 million under the RMF, particularly under the regional and rural funding scheme I just mentioned here, the regional and remote funding stream. So it's good to see that we're funding infrastructure increasingly in Australia, which is a really big challenge to actually promote a circular economy market and increase our rates of circularity. But then, as I said, it's very hard to have a proper circular economy market if there aren't clear standards that actually can verify and credentialize a product or a material as being circular. And so you can't measure what you can't manage. Oh, sorry, rather, you can't manage what you can't measure. Sorry, I typed that incorrectly. So you can't manage what you can't measure, meaning we can't manage a circular economy if we can't actually measure the rate of circularity in products and materials. Now, luckily, Australia domestically is developing standards for waste and resource recovery, which is also complemented by international standards that are actually quite new, being developed by the ISO, the International Standards Organization. So Australian indicators, we look at it more through the lens of indicators, units, application, and definition, as listed here. And so this is basically trying to make sure we're clear about what we mean as governments, as civil society, as business, about what we actually mean when we say waste generation per person, return to productive use, local recycling rate. So a lot of companies or governments might make claims about the local recovery rate, the recycling rate, the secondary material utilization rate, like all these complicated terms. And what's important is in Australia, we have a very clear definition about what is actually meant by each of those terms. And so there's no ambiguity or no questions about the level of circularity that companies and governments are claiming. And similarly, we're really lucky that at a bigger picture, we have the International Standards Organization that are developing standards for circularity, including ISO 59020, which is looking at measuring and assessing circularity performance, but also looking at ISO 59010, which is looking at the transition of business models across the whole supply chain about how to embed circularity. And then there's also, similar to what I mentioned before with the Australian standards, ISO 59004, which is looking at more how do we define the exact terminology of a circular economy. And those three things are all interlinked. And these are very new. These are about 6 months old, these new standards. It also comes with a taxonomy. And taxonomy is just a framework to understand what is considered circular and what is not circular. And so in Australia, we're beginning to look at this and start to embed it into our own circularity definition and indicators. So it's very clear to government and market stakeholders what is actually considered circular and what is not circular. And it looks at these indicators similar to what I showed before with the domestic Australian indicators. We're also really lucky in Australia that to complement the verification methods, we actually have a national traceability framework being developed by the federal government. The national traceability framework aligns with what's known as the GS1 Global Traceability Standard, and it's a way of tracing the origin of goods and materials and the journey they've been through. And so the ability to actually trace material and its origin and where it's been and how it's being used is really important to verify and give confidence in the circularity of products and materials. So businesses are actually going to have to trace recycled content across all supply chains by 2027. And participants will have to actually verify data accuracy and maintain records about their materials and products for up to 5 years. So this is really important for the Australian context about how we actually provide confidence in the circular economy. So as I said, major barriers for the circular economy include a lack of recycling infrastructure and a lack of standards and data. And in Australia, we're trying to overcome these issues through the Recycling Modernisation Fund and through more robust standards and waste management data, particularly through domestic and international standards. Jakarta and Indonesia can perhaps start to look at these barriers and start to think about how they can overcome them, potentially by supporting the development of new recycling infrastructure, but also stronger data management and traceability, and look at global examples and including the ISO's case studies of where standards and credentials have been applied to provide confidence in the circularity of products and goods. Well, you can't measure, you can't manage. So to manage waste and a circular economy, data and traceability is paramount. But similarly, you can't have a circular economy if you don't have relevant infrastructure supporting the circularity processes I described earlier, being the 10 R's of circularity. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you, James. Excellent insights. Yeah, actually, your presentation is provide valuable inputs for Jakarta, I think, towards how the circular economy could be built. Yeah. And then James tried to explaining how Australia has implemented circular economy initiative. Yeah. And then we will see also the integrated into the Australia circular economy roadmap, right?
Yeah.
Which is includes a goal of reduction per capita waste by 10% until 2030. So it's also one of the things that interesting one is related to the recycling modernization fund schemes, yeah, RMF scheme. I guess this is what provides support for the regional and remote area, especially for the infrastructure, is it?
Yeah.
And this could serve as inspiration for Jakarta, I guess, particularly in providing infrastructure, not only funded by the government, but also supported by the private sectors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give applause to Mr. James. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. And then the last one, our speaker is coming from Indonesia, Mr. Rivo. Mr. Rivo, you there? Okay. Yeah, let me share your bio. Mr. Rivo holds a Master of Information Technology at University of Indonesia. He works for After Oil Energy Utama as the CEO, a renewable energy startup. And he gets so many rewards related to this major. One of them is the world's most innovative change maker at the Stanford University, United States. So we extend the floor to Mr. Rivo, who will now take the stage to present. Please.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Ahmad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me share the slide. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Rivo, CEO of After Oil. Let me introduce myself and mostly for After Oil. After Oil is distributed renewable energy integrator based on circular bioeconomy to fulfill our energy needs beyond oil, gas, and coal. The topic we'll discuss this short session is about the smart waste management from upstream to downstream, but in our case, in our version, it's 3-in-1 solution by CO2 regenerative energy. Before we get into the discussion, as usual, when we study and get exams at school or university, we must read the question first to understand and then write it down, the answer. If we know exactly the main problem, it means we have succeeded in the first half of the way. Then all the remains is how to find the best answer and solution. Back to the After Oil. In short, we are also known as a climate tech startup that's trying to solve 3 big problems in integration. Number 1 is climate change crisis. Secondly, finding affordable and sustainable green energy. And the third, city waste emergency. Okay. In June 2024, UN Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres said the world is on the highway to climate hell as the planet endures 12 straight months of unprecedented heat. As you know, fossil fuels like oil, gas, and coal are the largest contributor to global climate change, with over 75% of GHG emission and
Ripo?
90% of, yes?
Sorry, your slide hiding, the small one hiding to the big one. I guess you have to pull it, the slide. Let me
It's
try
already
again,
full.
maybe. Okay, that's, oops. There is some application over there.
It's running full.
Still there is a small square, I guess. Okay, just try
Let
again.
me stop and try to reshare. How about this one?
Still processing it. Good. Okay.
Okay, let's continue. In June 2024, like I said before, Antonio Guterres, the chief of UN, said the world is on highway of climate hell as planet endures 12 straight months of precedented heat. As you know, fossil fuel like oil, gas, and coal, like I said before, the largest contributor for the global climate change. We can feel it recently when the temperature in our homes feels very hot, even at night. That's what I experienced myself at home in Depok. It reached 36 degrees Celsius at night, not at noon. And you know, people always blame fuel vehicle pollution from gasoline or diesel and coal and power plants. But have you thought that the blue tank we use every day for cooking at home does the same in the middle? Because for every 1 kilogram of LPG consumption, we emit 3 kilograms of CO2 into the atmosphere. And the next question, next problem is it's been 9 years since SDG were announced, 2015, that everyone should have access to clean, modern, and sustainable energy by 2030. But the fact in reality, there is no sign that the world will make it to this target in time. Why? That's our big question and quite challenging. And we can go to the next problem. Meanwhile, waste problems in Indonesia are getting worse in the cities across the country to an emergency level, including in Jakarta. The classic problem is almost the same. Landfills are overloaded and finding a new location is not easy. During our in-depth study, we found that over 50% of municipal solid waste is biowaste. With the population reaching 12 million people in Jakarta, it generates waste around 8,400 tons per day. After we have looked at this major problem as an opportunity since 2018 to develop and produce advanced biofuels from biowaste. In advanced biofuels, we can convert any biowaste, forestry waste, agricultural waste, including biowaste in the city from households and industry. Recommended by European Union called Renewable Energy Directive 2 or RED 2 into basic energy elements in terms biochar. And then we can make any fuel beyond fossil fuels. So what is the ideal fuel for the next 3 decades to the target of achieving SDG 2030 and net zero 2050? We summarize them into the following 5 criteria. The number 1 must be sustainable, and then carbon neutral at least, not competing with food needs, not competing with agricultural land and forest either. And the last one must be compatible with existing infrastructure in the world today, starting from the vehicles or machines that need the fuels, transportation infrastructure, and storage. The new type of biofuel that can meet the fifth criteria is biofuels second generation or advanced biofuels, the fuels that made from bio-waste. So 3-in-1 solution is the smart solution for those problems from upstream to downstream. There are 3 steps on our roadmap to achieve energy independence. The first step focuses on the capability building to convert biowaste into biochar by a local community, where biochar becomes a gas carrier in upstream. Then, at the user premises, SMEs use refill biochar with a smart tube. It's a simple gasification cylinder to produce biosyn gas in the place in time. Another user, especially for the industrial and commercial, there are 3 types that we can produce here. Each type has a different process path to get optimized fuels. The group's number 1, oxygen fuels, the fuel that contains oxygen. We can choose biomethanol for marine fuels. It's free of sulfur, or biodiesel for the perfect cheap LPG alternative. And secondly, biohydrocarbon, like biogasoline for our cars, green diesel for our trucks, and sustainable aviation fuel to replace existing fuel. And the last, even carbon-free fuel, biohydrogen for fuel cell electric vehicles. Even though it's micro scale, the upstream solution must be in compliance with ESG to save the planet, help the people, and make profit. Why? Simple answer. To make these activities are independent and sustainable in the long run. So biowaste is carbonized at microscale distributed location with ASP reactor. As you know, Jakarta has more than 1,000 waste temporary shelter sites, can optimize them instead of relying on landfills. There are 3 benefits at least. 1-day processing, making biochar will reduce biowaste volume quickly. Value added from liability problem into assets. As a basic energy density increases 2 times to high energy content, up to 30 megajoule per kilogram, or 2/3 of the petroleum energy content. By using the circular 3F concept, fuels, fertilizer, and food, in circular bioeconomy world, we can solve the energy and food problems at the same time. Processing always biowaste into smokeless biochar as basic energy as the main product by local community. At the same time, it produces flue gas, CO2, sulfur, SOx, NOx, and VOC, volatile organic compound, as the waste of the waste. So we capture all the components and process into fertilizer. Then we can produce even in the aridest land for food cheaply, greenly, and sustainable. This is comparison between incinerator with our ESP Plus. Both are common methods of waste treatment, but having different processes, temperature, and products, and also environmental impact. One of the easiest and cheapest way to turn waste from liability into asset is making biochar. It can also be used as complete materials, feedstock, and various other derivative products. There are many advantages and benefits of biochar, like it has higher energy density, almost 2 times comparing with other raw biomass, gasification ready, freely leachate, non-smoky when burned, and etc. You can see that energy density biochar is only half of LPG on average, but the price is much cheaper. So people will save energy by spending up to 70%. Biosyn gas is a carbon neutral synthetic gas that can be used directly for heating, cooking, or even generating electricity as well if necessary. Just connect it to the genset. It's affordable renewable gas for SME. As you see in the energy transition timeline, regenerative energy is the way to capture CO2. No matter if it comes from fossil fuels or renewables, then turn it into the energy. So regenerative energy is made by biochar plus CO2 emissions into advanced biofuels, like I mentioned before, bio-LPG, biogasoline, green diesel, SAF, or even biohydrogen. We can make a huge leap because it's beyond renewable and sustainable energy. We are trying to make affordable into something different can do, regardless of their current situation. Global change is like a giant choreography where everyone just needs to take one step from their current position. For instance, for more than 1 billion people who currently burn direct firewood, which is unhealthy, one step is switching to use biomass gasification stoves like smart stove. And secondly, SMEs who use LPG can switch to smart tube or maybe biodym or bio-LPG in the next step. LPG infrastructure can be used directly for biodym or bio-LPG, including all gas stoves and cylinders. One step from hydrocarbon into bihydrocarbon for billions of people using existing cars, motorbikes, powered by gasoline or diesel to switch to drop in biofuels. And the last one, even electric vehicles won't be CO2 emission free until the electricity company that powers your car reaches carbon neutrality, depending on the country by at least 2050. So you'll still pollute the environment with electricity emission until your EV dies. But it's also impossible to make carbon neutral EVs with renewable electricity, either from biomethanol via reformed methanol fuel cell or from biodym via reformed dym fuel cell. Here is 3-in-1 solution, namely CO2 regenerative energy. How concrete is it? First, all waste is converted into charcoal. Scavengers can only collect about a quarter of the 8,400 tons waste per day, and the rest goes to the landfills. All waste that ends up in the landfill is converted into AFC, or activated and functionalized carbon. The result will be 2,000 tons of AFC daily. So what's that for? Those 2,000 tons of AFC will be able to absorb 7,400 tons of CO2, or around 28% of the total emission from 1.1 gigawatt power plant near Jakarta. If AFC plus CO2 are reacted in the Budor reaction, they'll make 9,400 tons of CO2 gas, which will equal 330 megawatt of power, or 30% of the power plant's fuel needs. As you can see, the emission problem gets solved by 28%, electricity gets solved by 30%, and waste gets solved by 100%. Nice problem to have. Jakarta has run out of the waste, not even enough to capture CO2 released by power plants. So there is an opportunity as well for other cities around Jakarta that have the same waste problem. Yes, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. Let's do action with the committee to achieve prosperity in our city.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rivo. It's also a great sharing that your startup have doing well. So after Oil Indonesia present an innovative approach to waste management and renewable energy through its carbon dioxide regenerative energy solution, right? And by converting waste into the clean energy, the company aims to reduce carbon emissions significantly while promoting sustainable practices and creating green jobs in the local communities. Thank you very much. The vision also includes achieving a net zero emission to 2050, making renewable energy affordable and accessible for all. So give it applause to all speakers here. Thank you. Now, next, there will be two pre-decided questions that will be asked to all panelists. This segment is envisioned as an interaction between panelists, maybe around 30 minutes for the two questions. Okay, first question is, what are the key factors that contributes a successful waste management program that effectively change community behavior? And how long does it take to significantly raise public awareness about waste management issues? Are there specific incentives provided to community to boost awareness and participation in waste management? So all the speakers, you got it? The question?
Yes.
Okay. Now we start from Takehara-san, please.
はい。OK。シャイクルさん、
はい。
大丈夫ですか？
はい。効果的に地域住民の行動を変える、廃棄物管理プログラムを成功させるための、重要な要因は何ですか？または廃棄物管理の問題に対して市民の意識を大幅に高めるにはどれぐらい時間がかかりましたか？また廃棄物管理への、意識と参加を高めるために、地域に対する具体的なインセンティブとかはありますでしょうか？これはすべてのパネリストに対して聞きたい質問ですけれども、最初は竹原さんからご回答お願いしたいです。
はい。ありました。メールの回答どうだったっけ？あります。はい。じゃあ私から回答させていただきます。ここ？
I will answer the questions.
はい。大崎町では徹底した分別と排出、回収、で、施設搬入ルールといった個別のルールがそれぞれ関連する関係で、存在することが重要と考えています。
In Osaki Town, I think it's important that individual rules such as a strict separation of waste discharge, separation of waste collection, and rules for bringing waste into facilities exist in a related system.
はい。つまり、先ほど説明した通り、住民と行政と回収処理業者、それぞれ責任と役割を果たすことが重要になります。
So it's important that residents, the government, and also the collection or treatment companies fulfill their responsibilities and roles.
これも。はい。で、大崎町では住民に理解を促すために、約150のコミュニティで3回ずつ、計450回の説明会を3ヶ月で実施しました。
And in order to promote understanding and awareness among residents, Osaki Town held a total of about 450 explanatory sessions, 3 times each for about 150 communities or areas over a 3-month period.
はい。住民の行動変容を促すインセンティブというよりも、どちらかというと、ディスインセンティブの、削減、モチベーションの方がより行動変容を促すというふうに考えています。
And personally, I think that this incentive, like giving understanding and motivation, is better to encourage people than merely incentives.
大崎は処分場の危機の時点で住民に対して処分場の延命化か焼却炉を作るか新たな施設を作るかそれぞれオープンにして説明をしたことで住民に協力いただいたものと思っています。
So we gained the residents' cooperation by explaining at the time of the landfill crisis in Osaki to the residents. We explained about the options of extending the life of the landfill or making incinerator or making a new landfill. And we open about the cost of each option, and we explained the details.
以上です。Thank you.
That's from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we would like to invite Ms. Taylor. Please step with your answer, please.
Sure. So I think in terms of looking to really change community behavior, one thing that we've found is really critical is getting the community involved so that they feel some level of ownership over any changes that happen in the solid waste management system. So one of the things that we found to be successful is in engaging the community in data collection, even just doing things like litter surveys or citizen science so that you can see what's in your own backyard, and see some of yourself in that data, see some of how your own actions will potentially translate to those things. And I think that it's been really powerful to put that data in the hands of people that know their context the best, and know what solutions are going to work for them. I also feel strongly that people should know their waste, for lack of a better phrase. So I'm a big proponent of, taking school groups to things like recycling centers and landfills that service their local area so that they can understand that there is no away. It's all going somewhere. Because I think that also makes them better stewards. In terms of how long it takes, I think that varies greatly depending on the size of the city, the diversity, the spread of the community, because we've also found that messaging needs to be really deliberate and needs to be tailored to different audiences. In terms of incentives, we've seen a lot of things that have worked. I think it comes down to making alternative products and systems, especially circular systems, affordable, accessible, and convenient for consumers. I think you need to meet people where they are. That could be, drop-off locations for recyclables at more frequently visited stores. It could be money off of purchases for bringing reusable items, or it could be getting money back if you deposit a product back to, a plastic bank or to an EPR system. But I think that it really needs to be context specific, and it needs to be convenient to work for consumers, and be an incentive that they will want. I think that's important.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we'd like to invite Mr. James. Mr. James, please.
Well, thank you very much. As I covered off on in my presentation, I think trust and credibility is key to changing community behavior. Because if people perceive waste management and a circular economy as greenwashing or false or, not credible, it will not incentivize community change, and it will not incentivize good community behavior in engaging with the circular economy and sustainable waste management. So it takes a long time, as the previous speakers have said, to really drive this change, because raising awareness is one thing which takes enough time about, if you want to raise awareness about the credibility of the circular economy, that's a long process, but it also takes a fair bit longer to translate that understanding and awareness into action. And so in that sense, you've got two components. You've got to raise awareness, but you also need to turn awareness into action. Those are the two big challenges of changing community behavior. But as I said, I really think trust and credibility of the circular economy and circular processes is very important to change community behavior. I think specific incentives could also be as I said before, the drive or the positive economic benefits of the circular economy, including the establishment of infrastructure and the production of, or rather the jobs in the processing of circular materials and actually manifesting the circular economy process that has a lot of jobs. So that might be the incentive to help not just boost awareness, but also change community perceptions and behaviors towards the circular economy. Secondly, with regard to Jakarta, I think Jakarta can achieve a similar step, a similar success to Sydney or Australia more generally, through once again changing the perception of circular economy in order to help make it become more credible and more trustworthy, and therefore change the behavior of consumers.
Okay, great. James, yeah, some that we highlight, maybe this is also the challenge. Your country also the same like us, yeah? Community behavior is also the challenge one. Thank you. Then I would like to invite Mr. Rivo to respond to the question panel one, please. Still mute.
Okay, it's a good question. I agree with the Taylor opinions because in our ecosystem, the local community is the key as our strategic partner who will help us to convert by waste into the biochar. I think it doesn't need too long to implement because it will maybe a few months, 5 or 6 months is more than enough to educate the local community because it's micro scale. And SMEs as the off-takers near the micro scale biochar production facility. About the incentive, that will be good if we can get it to encourage people, but not a must, I think. As long as we can optimize the existing waste shelter site facilities, and don't forget, to make social entrepreneurship run well and sustainable, it must generate income and profitable. So it's from the for the economic side. So the local community is not only active in carbonizing the waste, but they can also get economic benefits directly from these activities. In addition, SMEs can get cheap energy and save money by reduce production costs in their business without subsidy, of course. So maybe that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And finally, the subsidized as the last effort. Okay, thank you, Mr. Rivo. Now we back to the second question for the panels. The question is, what steps should Jakarta take to achieve success similar to your city? And then how should waste management be integrated from upstream to downstream to ensure an effective and sustainable system? Mr. Rivo is Indonesia, ya. Jadi must be also giving the comment through this question. Okay, start with Takehara-san, please.
はい、大崎町と同じような成功を収めるために、ジャカルタはどのようなステップを踏むべきでしょうか。また、効果的で持続可能なシステムを確保するために、廃棄物管理を川上から川下までどのように統合すべきでしょうか。竹原さん、お願いします。
はい、OK。先ほどとも重複しますが、ルールを作るというところは非常に大事だと思ってます。
Although it overlaps with my presentation, the one important thing is to set the rules.
最低でも生ゴミ、食品残渣等ですね。あと草木ですね。これは徹底的に分別をする必要があると思います。
At the very last, the food waste or food residue and cut branches from plants and trees must be truly separated.
これが家庭で分けることができれば、4割の減量化というのは削減することは可能です。
If these are separated at home, the amount of waste or garbage can be reduced by at least 40%.
当然分けて回収したものは埋め立てない。そのための再資源化は、検討することが重要になってきます。
Of course, the separated and collected garbage or materials should not be landfilled, and recycling for this purpose must be considered.
大崎町もそうですけど、常に埋め立て処分場を減らすには、どういうことをしたらいいかという視点が大事だというところになります。以上です。
It always applied in Osaki also, so it is necessary to always take the perspective of reducing the amount of landfill waste. That's from me.
Thank you very much. Now to the Ms. Taylor, please.
Sure. So there are a few things that I think are really exciting for Jakarta right now. First off, I completely agree with James and Takehara that having metrics and a common language are really key. I think identifying what your desired state is and building trust and awareness around that is a really important first step. Second, I think that the national extended producer responsibility rules in Indonesia are really promising. And I think that Jakarta has a real opportunity to be a central player in that and to demonstrate how extended producer responsibility systems can work on the ground. I'm a firm believer that industry needs to be at the table and part of these solutions. And I think that especially with the really high quantity of domestic and regional brands that have a footprint in Jakarta, I think that could be really interesting. The third is something that we've found in a lot of other cities, is the involvement of the informal waste sector in any kind of transition towards a circular system. I think that the informal sector really plays a tremendous role in adding value to different types of materials. And in preventing waste from ending up in the environment. And so I think that there's a great opportunity to engage them in conversations and be part of that transition. One thing that we found in Semarang was that household waste separation would be just a really beneficial first step. Just having discrete household separation and separate collection systems for the different waste streams, even just separating wet and dry waste would go a long way, as Takehara said, towards diverting the waste from landfill in the first place. And then finally, I really think that a lot of it comes back to community involvement. I know some of the questions have been around how do we engage communities, and especially, diverse communities. And so I think that whether it's through citizen science or targeted awareness campaigns, creative incentives that are going to work, I think that those transitions really need to be for the people. And I think Jakarta has a tremendous opportunity to be a model for how that can work in a extremely metropolitan, extremely diverse, really booming economy. So I would love to see that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, the last part, we also agree with you that we have to learn from developed countries, especially in the community, how to change the community behavior that happened in Jakarta, I guess. Thank you. Now I would like to Mr. James. Please.
Well, I accidentally answered this a little bit in my first question, but I'll reiterate what I said basically with respect to the trust and the perception of circularity. There has to be really strong credentials and certification mechanisms to trace and verify the legitimacy of circularity in products and materials within Jakarta. And in doing so, you can drive trust and you can drive, therefore, behavior change for the long term. But I think also really trying to demonstrate to people that the government is investing in relevant infrastructure to accommodate the 10 R's of circularity is important, and also changing perceptions as well. So people need to be confident in the verification that products and materials are truly circular, but they also need to be confident in the infrastructure or the waste management infrastructure necessary to enable a circular economy. And in doing so and building that confidence and that perception, people in Jakarta will, I imagine, change their behavior and their perception and their sentiment towards the circular economy and more sustainable waste management.
Okay, thank you, James. The last one, maybe would like to invite Mr. Rivo.
Okay. As you know, about the solution, if it's about a big project, so it means big money or big investment and also high risk. If we can running small project, so it's less risk. What I do is like in our project in Yogyakarta, supported by Temasek Singapore. So agree with like James' opinion. We can collect data and measure in small scale, low risk, and we can also running the pilot project in Jakarta as well. That's our my answer. That's it. We can also optimize. Jakarta has more than 1,000 waste temporary shelter sites. We can use it and optimize it. That's from our opinion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rivo, your comments and answer. Now we finally got the question and answer session for the participant who would like to ask the question. Please type them in the Q&A chat box. I guess there is, wow, so many, 18 questions. Maybe one or two questions I have to pick. Let me check first. Okay. First question is coming from Bapak Yurianto, ya, Badan Pengelola Sumber Daya Manusia, the HR Department. The question is addressed to Takehara-san. What is the most difficulties one when you implemented the recycle Osaki system? And is there any regulation in terms of engineering social regulation from the central government or local government when you implemented the recycle Osaki system? And how you can calculate cost per person that join the recycling project? Is that clear, the question, Takehara-san?
はい、OK。シャイクルさん、お願いします。
お先システムを導入する際に最も困難だったことは何でしょうか。または、そのお先システムを導入する際には、中央政府、またはお先として地方自治体からは、そのエンジニアリングの、社会的な規制に関しては、どういう規制とかはありますでしょうか。または、先ほど、1人当たりのゴミのコストというのが、ゴミのコスト全体というのが出ているんですけれども、それはどのように計算していますでしょうか。
はい。じゃあ順番に。まず一番困難だったのは、やっぱり住民の理解と協力になります。
First of all, the most difficult part is to gain the understanding and cooperation from residents.
はい。そのエンジニアリングの社会的な規制というのが、ちょっと具体的にわからないので、そこはちょっと答えは控えさせていただきたいとは思います。
Regarding the engineering social regulation, I have no details about it, so I cannot answer about it.
はい。最後にコストの計算なんですが、これは、日本の国は自治体に、ローカルガバメントに1年に1回、計画を策定させて、で、それに対しての、ゴミの搬出量、それと、経費、コストですね。これを、報告を求めてます。 それで、人口から割り戻して1人当たりを出しただけということになります。
So regarding calculating the cost for a garbage or waste treatment, every year, once a year, the local government will make a planning for the garbage treatment, and they will secure a budget for the plan. So we calculate the cost of the garbage treatment per person by divide the total amount of the budget with the number of people in our city.
OK?
Does it answer your questions?
Okay. Thank you, Takehara-san. Now, back to the question from the chat box. I saw the question from Ibu Riani from Environment Agency. The question addressed to Ms. Taylor. The question is, waste sorting and recycling is an effort to reduce the amount of waste in the landfills. Can you share what efforts to reduce waste before waste is formed, reduce and reuse in your country? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. One of the things that we really try to push is looking at a system holistically. And taking that downstream information to inform upstream change. So, for example, we've had people that have said our product is fully recyclable, but that doesn't mean that there is a bin for consumers to put it in. That doesn't mean there is an end market for it. That doesn't mean that waste sorting systems are able to sort it out. So one of the things we look at is how can you design products in a way that they match the waste management system? So how can you build things that are intended to be reusable, reconstructible, safe materials? I think that upstream design is really critical so that we don't have those knock-on effects downstream, and we can prevent them from entering the landfill in the first place. One thing that's been really successful in Athens is having really abundant resources to help with repair and refurbishing of materials. So your first stop isn't the landfill. Your first stop is, a repair shop, or it's, a place where you can donate it to another local organization. There's ways to keep it in circulation. So I think that there are things all the way up to, corporate measures around redesign and rethinking systems, all the way down to local resources, I think that can be done to address that so that we're not just looking at keeping it from landfill, we're looking at creating materials that are designed to not go in the landfill in the first place.
Okay, great. Thank you, Taylor, for the answer the question. Now the other question also coming from Bima Yakti. This question is addressed to Mr. James. Do you all have socio-cultural issues? As you know that here in Indonesia, we have a lot of what we call NGO who always hinder our effort to recycling our waste or garbage in every town here. As know, many Indonesian citizens have their own capability in transferring plastics and food waste into something valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And there's a lot of social entrepreneurship in Australia to help drive the circular economy. There's a very good one called Banish, Banish, and they do some great work essentially convening business and government stakeholders to create a circular economy market. And one of the key things I think civil society and NGOs can do is be a convener for civil society, like other civil society organizations, government and business, to promote a proper circular economy market that enables the regulations and the procurement and the supply of circular materials to actually be exchanged in a market. Because fundamentally, markets will drive long-term circular economy. That's the truth of the matter. We live in a capitalist world. But civil society can play a very big role in convening the relevant stakeholders to generate that market. And that's what Banish does very, very well. I think also if you want to try and drive change and perception of the circular economy, as we've previously discussed, you have to be willing to change people's perceptions and behaviors. And that is largely driven by bottom-up, community-based organizations that can effectively communicate and advocate for a circular economy among and within the community, which is very, very important in the context of driving social change and social promotion of the circular economy. And in that context, activists and advocacy organizations play a very important role.
Right. Thank you very much, James. And then we have to check again. Okay. The last one is a question to the Mr. Rivo from Pak Indra Maulana. Mr. Rivo, your innovation is very interesting. My question is, how long needed for bio waste turn into the biocharcoal? Is that any comparison number for how many biocharcoal can be created from bio waste? Please, Mr. Rico.
Okay, thank you. The process is only about only 1 day processing. We do starting at Yogyakarta case, starting from 2 tons per day, and then going up to 3-4 tons per day, and raising up until up to 10 tons per day. Starting from the small scale, and that's it. The process is only 1 day processing, so we don't have too long enough. So in this case, the waste today, processing today, and finish tomorrow. So tomorrow we will process for the waste for tomorrow. So that's continuous.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Rico. Okay, then finally we have reached the final part of the Urban Talks webinar, Series 3. Before we concluding today's webinar, we express to our gratitude to all speakers and participants for joining us, especially the speakers, Ms. Taylor, because you are on a late night at this time. Really appreciate your time spent in this webinar. Thanks a lot. And then let me share the conclusion drawn from our discussion and deliberation today. Osaka City in Japan has successfully reduced waste by 84% and achieved the highest recycling rate in countries through the collaborative approach involving the community and local businesses. This model encourages residents to actively separate their waste and is supported by educational program from the local government. Meanwhile, USA has also introduced the circular economy concept known as the CAP model, which develop waste become valuable economically, besides connects countries to track plastic waste in all over the world. Australia also brings the RMF, the Recycling Modernization Fund scheme, for circular economy initiative aiming for 10% reduction in waste per person by 2030. After oil, Indonesia is turning waste into clean energy to reduce carbon emission and create green jobs with a goal of net zero emission by 2050. And this example highlights effective strategy for improving waste management worldwide. The last one is the best practice learned from all speakers today from various countries should serve as a valuable input to the government to start addressing smart waste management from the very beginning, starting with the household, then moving to the temporary storage sites, and finally to the landfills. This should be part of the cohesive and integrated waste management system that operates from upstream to downstream. It is also essential to focus not only on infrastructure, but also on how we can achieve widespread behavior transformation within the community. Once again, thank you very much and appreciate to all speakers, Takehara-san, Taylor, James, and Rifo, and all participants from government, NGO, private sector, and state-owned enterprise in the local level. Hopefully we can meet again in another occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give one final round of applause for our speakers. And then we have to end this session. Good afternoon to everyone. Next, I will hand it over to Mr. Rudy. Mr. Rudy, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmad Gifari, and thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the speakers and moderators for joining today's webinar. And once again, let's give another round of applause to our speakers, moderator, and all participants for today's webinar sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, before we officially close the webinar session, we really appreciate if you kindly fill in the evaluation form on your Zoom screen. There are 6 items that you need to fill, and I'm going to explain in Bahasa Indonesia. Bapak Ibu akan tampak 6 pernyataan penilaian evaluasi penyelenggaraan webinar hari ini. Bapak Ibu tinggal memilih pernyataan sangat setuju, setuju, tidak setuju, dan sangat tidak setuju. Kita mulai dengan pernyataan yang pertama. Kualitas materi sesuai dengan tema dan kebutuhan partisipan, tentukan pilihan Bapak Ibu dimulai dari sekarang. Pernyataan yang kedua, kualitas visual atau gambar paparan dan teks sangat baik dan jelas terlihat, tentukan pilihan Bapak Ibu dimulai dari sekarang. Pernyataan yang ketiga, kualitas audio sangat jelas dan jernih, tentukan pilihan Bapak Ibu dimulai dari sekarang. Pernyataan yang keempat, kualitas penyampaian materi oleh narasumber sangat baik dan mudah dipahami. Tentukan pilihan Bapak Ibu dimulai dari sekarang. Pernyataan yang kelima, sesi tanya jawab berjalan efektif dan mampu menjawab pertanyaan peserta. Tentukan pilihan Bapak Ibu dimulai dari sekarang. Dan pernyataan yang terakhir, secara keseluruhan penyelenggaraan seminar virtual atau webinar hari ini berjalan dengan baik dan efektif. Tentukan pilihan Bapak Ibu dimulai dari sekarang. Baik, terima kasih. Thank you very much for fulfilling the evaluation form. And we would like to inform to all participants that the material from this webinar can be accessed through the following link in the chat box, or you can click in bit.ly/webinar_urban talk 3. To the esteemed guests, we conclude the webinar Building a Smart Waste Management System in Jakarta. On behalf of Jakarta Professional Government, I bid farewell. And once again, thank you very much for your attention and participation, everyone. Have a nice day. Ohayo gozaimasu. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sampai jumpa. Terima kasih semuanya. Thank you very much to all speakers, Mr. Gabari, all moderator. Thank you so much.
Bicara tentang kota global, berada di peringkat berapakah kota Jakarta? Saat ini Jakarta menduduki peringkat ke-74 dari 156 kota besar di dunia. Membangun Jakarta menjadi pusat ekonomi dan bisnis. Bagaimana caranya? Jakarta akan menjadi kota yang mendorong perekonomian dari skala kecil hingga terbesar, sehingga perekonomian Jakarta mampu bersaing secara internasional. Pembangunan sumber daya manusia adalah salah satu unsur utama untuk mewujudkan Jakarta sebagai kota global. Sebagai kota global, Jakarta akan mendorong akses dan pemerataan kesehatan masyarakat, inklusivitas, hingga kesetaraan dalam berbangsa dan bernegara. Nyaman juga menjadi indikator yang tidak kalah penting dalam kota global. Agar masyarakat semakin nyaman untuk tinggal, Jakarta sebagai kota global akan menyediakan fasilitas publik dan tata ruang perkotaan yang aman, nyaman, dan inovatif. Sebagai kota global, Jakarta tidak dapat berdiri sendiri. Perlu sinergitas kuat dari masyarakat serta daerah-daerah yang meliputi sekitarnya. Dengan demikian, Jakarta juga dapat menjadi kota pendorong inovasi dan kesuksesan kota-kota lainnya di Indonesia. Meskipun Jakarta sedang bertransformasi menjadi kota global, namun tetap tidak meninggalkan perannya dalam bersinergi dengan pemerintah pusat, pemerintah daerah, BUMN, BUMD, swasta, komunitas, hingga masyarakat secara luas. Dalam menuju kota global, Jakarta juga perlu memperhatikan beberapa indikator penting lainnya untuk mendorong Jakarta sebagai salah satu epicentrum dunia. Untuk mewujudkan Jakarta sebagai kota global, diperlukan kerjasama dan sinergitas kuat dari kita semua.
Aku sih jadi kota bisnis ya. Iya, kayak gitu sama juga pendapat. Soalnya kan kota yang paling sibuk kan, sini kan kayak banyak macet, terus ya pasti tetap sibuk, sibuknya tetap ada. Orang kerja juga tetap kayak biasanya.
Menurut saya tetap akan menjadi kota yang modern, yang tetap bertaraf global. Karena di mana di Jakarta ini udah terlanjur ya sebenarnya, udah terlanjur banyak pembangunan untuk perusahaan-perusahaan besar di kota besar ini. Jadi akan tetap investor-investor pun tetap akan menanamkan sahamnya untuk di masing-masing perusahaan di ibu kota ini. Jadi menurut saya tetap akan berjalan seperti biasa ya, tetap akan banyak juga perusahaan-perusahaan yang di Jakarta. Cuman ya mungkin untuk yang perusahaan-perusahaan yang memang seperti pemerintah itu ya mungkin akan pindah ke sana dan mungkin akan memulai ibu kota baru untuk di Kalimantan nanti. Jadi ya menurut saya tetap akan bisa berjalan seperti semula aja sih.
Kalau bisa kayak
bisa aja sih.
Bisa.
Soalnya kan investor masih tertarik di Jakarta.
Seperti ditingkatkan SDM-nya atau infrastrukturnya ditingkatkan lagi, sama lingkungannya tetap harus kebersihannya dijaga gitu.
Kenapa? Karena menurut saya sekarang aja yang kalau dilihat ya di beberapa perusahaan-perusahaan besar itu orang-orang asing pun datang, ada yang jadi pendatang untuk yang memiliki jabatan juga bahkan di Indonesia ini. Jadi kayak mereka tuh datang untuk membangun perusahaan supaya bisa lebih besar, lebih bertaraf internasional juga.
Jakarta bisa apa enggak? Bisa-bisa aja, biar kayak New York, Paris, atau London tuh ada aja kemungkinannya gitu. Kita harus optimis ke arah situ sebenarnya. Dan menurutku apa sih yang bisa bikin Jakarta biar jadi global city kayak yang lain tuh, menurutku kayaknya sebagai negara yang sangat berbudaya, kita bisa deh ngangkat keunikan budaya kita, terutama Jakarta ini ya, sebagai nilai lebihnya nih, sebagai yang bisa kita tonjolkan gitu untuk ke arah global city di masa depan. Keren juga nanti kayaknya kalau global city berbasiskan budaya.
Dalam menuju kota global, Jakarta memerlukan sinergitas yang kuat dari setiap stakeholders dan masyarakat guna mendorong pencapaian indikator dalam Global City Index sehingga dapat mewujudkan kota Jakarta sebagai kota yang aman, nyaman, inklusif, serta pusat ekonomi dan bisnis berskala global. Yuk, bersama wujudkan ekosistem menuju Jakarta sebagai kota global.
Selamat pagi. Excellent. BPSDM Jaya.
Badan Pengembangan Sumber Daya Manusia Provinsi DKI Jakarta merupakan pusat pengembangan kompetensi aparatur sipil negara di lingkungan Provinsi DKI Jakarta. BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta hadir untuk mewujudkan aparatur sipil negara yang profesional, berintegritas, dan mampu melayani masyarakat DKI Jakarta dengan sepenuh hati. Berdiri pada tanggal 2 Juni 1968, institusi ini pertama kali dikenal dengan Pusat Pendidikan dan Pelatihan Personil atau Pusdiklatnil. Kemudian bertransformasi hingga pada tahun 2017 ditetapkan sebagai Badan Pengembangan Sumber Daya Manusia atau BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta. Dan pada tahun 2019, BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta membentuk Jakarta Public Policy Center. BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta mempunyai visi terdepan dalam pengembangan sumber daya manusia dan bertaraf internasional. Hal ini dapat diwujudkan dengan 5 misi. Selaras dengan pemerintah Provinsi DKI Jakarta, BPSDM turut mengaplikasikan core value ASN berakhlak, yaitu
berorientasi pelayanan. Kami berkomitmen memberikan pelayanan prima demi kepuasan masyarakat Jakarta.
Sebagai aparatur sipil negara yang profesional, kami, BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta, siap untuk memahami dan memenuhi kebutuhan masyarakat. Dengan ramah, cekatan, solutif, dan dapat diandalkan, BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta turut melaksanakan berbagai program kegiatan pengembangan kompetensi seperti kompetensi dasar dan manajerial, kompetensi teknis dan fungsional, kompetensi pemerintahan dan sosial kultural, tugas belajar, klinik kompetensi, knowledge management, serta uji kompetensi dan sertifikasi untuk ASN Provinsi DKI Jakarta.
Akuntabel, kami bertanggung jawab atas amanah yang diberikan.
BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta selalu berupaya melakukan tugas dengan jujur, bertanggung jawab, cermat, disiplin, dan berintegritas tinggi. BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta juga berprinsip bahwa setiap pekerjaan harus dilaksanakan hingga tuntas dan dapat dipertanggungjawabkan.
Kompeten. Kami terus belajar dan mengembangkan kapabilitas.
Seiring peningkatan kompetensi diri untuk menjawab tantangan yang selalu berubah, BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta berinovasi dengan penggunaan sistem informasi Smart Bangkom untuk menunjang proses penyelenggaraan terintegrasi.
Harmoni. Kami saling peduli dan menghargai perbedaan.
BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta senantiasa memastikan seluruh pegawai dihargai apapun latar belakangnya, berperilaku objektif, proporsional, dan mendorong kemajuan bersama untuk membangun sinergitas antar rekan kerja di lingkungan pegawai BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta.
Loyal. Kami berdedikasi dan mengutamakan kepentingan bangsa dan negara.
BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta selalu memegang teguh ideologi Pancasila dan Undang-Undang Dasar Negara Republik Indonesia tahun 1945. Kami menjaga nama baik instansi serta menjaga rahasia jabatan dan rahasia negara.
Adaptif. Kami terus berinovasi dan antusias dalam menggerakkan ataupun menghadapi perubahan.
BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta selalu menyesuaikan diri dalam menghadapi perubahan, bertindak proaktif menciptakan program-program pelatihan baru dan unggulan, disajikan dengan metode terkini dan alat bantu yang mutakhir, dan mengoptimalkan pembelajaran online atau e-learning.
Kolaboratif. Kami membangun kerjasama yang sinergis.
BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta selalu memberikan kesempatan kepada seluruh stakeholder melalui sinergi dan kolaborasi baik di lingkungan internal maupun eksternal. Kami terus menggerakkan pemanfaatan berbagai sumber daya untuk membangun kolaborasi di dalam maupun di luar negeri. Kami selalu memanfaatkan teknologi informasi dalam menyelenggarakan pelatihan yang lebih efektif dan efisien melalui seminar virtual, microlearning, mobile learning, dan pelatihan lainnya untuk memenuhi hak pegawai dalam mengembangkan kompetensi tanpa mengenal batas jarak dan waktu. Kami senantiasa bertekad dan bekerja keras mengembangkan dan memperbaiki diri agar BPSDM Provinsi DKI Jakarta dapat menjadi world-class training organization.
Jakarta, kota yang tangguh, selalu siap memanfaatkan peluang dan menghadapi tantangan. Banyak tantangan di Jakarta yang harus diatasi, seperti degradasi lingkungan, tata kelola transportasi, ekonomi, maupun lainnya.
Pembangunan Jakarta membutuhkan sumber daya manusia Badan Pengembangan Sumber Daya Manusia Provinsi DKI Jakarta menghadirkan Jakarta Corporate University atau Jakorpo. Jakorpo merupakan salah satu strategi Pemprov DKI Jakarta dalam menciptakan link and match antara pembelajaran dengan pencapaian kinerja organisasi.
Tujuannya adalah meningkatkan kompetensi ASN yang profesional, berintegritas, serta mampu melayani masyarakat DKI Jakarta dengan sepenuh hati. Jakorpo memungkinkan kita untuk mengakses berbagai pengetahuan secara daring. Kita akan dapat menghimpun dan mengelola pengetahuan yang tersebar di masing-masing individu. Kita juga dapat belajar kapanpun, dimanapun, sesuai dengan kebutuhan. Sehingga proses pembelajaran dapat kita ikuti tanpa harus meninggalkan rutinitas.
Jakorpo menyediakan learning journey di Pemprov DKI Jakarta, sehingga ketika kita menempati posisi jabatan tertentu dengan sejumlah kompetensi yang dipersyaratkan, kita dapat mudah mengetahui apa saja program pembelajaran yang perlu kita ikuti.
Dalam perspektif organisasi Pemprov DKI Jakarta, Jakorpo menjamin proses pembelajaran yang fokus kepada target organisasi, sehingga dapat berdampak pada peningkatan kinerja organisasi.
Di Jakorpo, kita dapat menjumpai communities of practice yang melibatkan pakar praktisi dan para pegawai internal yang ahli dan kompeten pada bidangnya.
Rasakan pembelajaran yang menyenangkan bersama Jakorpo. Jakorpo, cepat, tepat, menuju terdepan.